Well, hey, folks, I joined Ted Rollins on Court TV today to talk about the double homicide that occurred down in Laredo, Texas in 2018. The suspect in that case is going to trial today and is in the middle of this trial where he's accused of murdering his former lover and his 18-month-old baby. Well, hey, folks, I joined Ted Rollins on Court TV today to talk about the double homicide that occurred down in Laredo, Texas in 2018. The suspect in that case is going to trial today and is in the middle of this trial where he's accused of murdering his former lover and his 18-month-old baby. It was a horrendous case. Well, folks, this United States Border Patrol agent or former Border Patrol agent is accused of brutally murdering his secret girlfriend and the child that they had together, something that prosecutors are saying he did to avoid paying child support. Now, I'm going to explain how GPS location information may be the silver bullet in this criminal case against Ronald Burgos-Aviles. Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil in this video on that double murder trial going on down in Texas. Now, the story swirls around a former cop who attempted to avoid paying child support. This is all according to the prosecution's case. You see, prosecutors say that the only answer to resolving the problem, in his opinion, and this is the defendant's opinion, was to execute the child and the child's mother. This is another case in that growing string of murders where fathers allegedly kill their children. The crime scene was so horrific that talking about it brought seasoned investigators and first responders to tears. Now, as we get started on this case, I hope you'll take a quick moment, hit that like and subscribe button, and ring the bell and do all of those things so that you get all of our videos on cases just like this one. Now, this thing happened back in April of 2018, and Ronald Anthony Burgos-Aviles was a person of interest almost immediately upon his arrival at the crime scene, where this 28-year-old woman named Grizelda Hernandez and her 18-month-old baby, Dominic, were discovered deceased. She had been stabbed multiple times. The baby stabbed in the chest and in the throat. Now, the suspect became a suspect, and now the defendant became a suspect because he stayed at the murder scene, returned to the murder scene is more likely this scenario, and called 911 asking for an ambulance. It was learned that the woman had had a previous relationship with the defendant in this case while he was married and while he was still living with that woman and his children, I assume his wife and children. Now, during the affair that he had with Hernandez became pregnant and refused to have an abortion, even though he, according to court documents, suggested that. The child was born in 2016, and the relationship kind of fizzled out, but Hernandez was committed to that child and went about raising the child on her own. She named him Dominic. Now, the photographs online support that this little boy, Dominic, was loved and cared for by his mother. Hernandez had dreams of becoming a nurse, and she eventually went back to school, but her bills were piling up. And as her expenses increased, she reached out to Burgos-Aviles in the spring of 2018, so just before the murders, to get some financial support to help her pay her college expenses, to pay for child daycare, and whatever other expenses she had. The family ended up filing a wrongful death lawsuit against this defendant. In there, they described his reaction to her request for money, saying that he responded negatively, and he said that the relationship, if it became known, would negatively impact his marriage and his children, and it could negatively impact his job with the federal government. Well, the defendant had been serving as a United States Customs and Border Protection agent and had apparently done a pretty good job over his 9-year career, but things were about to take a turn for the worst when he allegedly hatched this plan to kill his former lover and their child. He asked her to meet him on April 9th, 2018 at the Father McNabo, and I hope I said that right, the Father McNabo Park. Now there were allegations that he had previously tried to kill his son with a needle injection, and frankly, you can learn more about that by just digging into this rabbit hole as you look at this case. I think more of that information will come out as the trial progresses. But on the day of their murders, forensic location data placed Burgos-Aviles in the area where the murders occurred, before and after the murders. And when I say within the area, I mean it was within feet of the location where the bodies were located. So let's just take a moment, and I've created a map that I want to explore with you to talk about some of the locations in this thing and give you a little better feel for what's going on in the case. I actually built the map while I was commenting on Court TV, so let's watch. Well, as we get started, let's take a look at this map and try to orient ourselves to what's going on in this area. Of course, we see the United States here, and what I've indicated down here in red are border crossings across Texas. So these are places where people can immigrate into the United States or go from the United States into Mexico at different checkpoints along the way. Now, the area that we're talking about in Texas is in the Laredo, Texas area. So we're going to zoom in on that area and just kind of get a little better sense for some of the specific areas that we're going to be talking about in this particular case. So let's take a minute and talk about some of the areas specific to this case. And folks, much of my information on locations where the suspect lived or where the victim lived came from one of our affiliates, Truthfinder. You can check out in the links below information on Truthfinder, including getting some discount codes and some free codes to be able to take advantage of Truthfinder and try it out for yourself. Now, they're an affiliate. That means we get a little bit of a commission out of that. It's about enough for me to pick up a Diet Dr. Pepper. So thanks so much for doing that. So here we have the suspect's home out on the northeast corner of Laredo. And then we have the victim's home down closer to the location where the crime scene actually occurred. We're going to come back and talk about that a little in a minute. Where we have the victim's home, and you'll notice that it is actually just a short walk to the crime scene area. But now let's go back, because there are a couple of other really important things here. There are actually a number of locations that are indicated on here with a little red diamond, and two of those I want to point out right off the bat and exclude. They come from location data that was collected when the investigators pulled all of the forensic information, the location information, off of that radio in Burgos-Aviles' Customs and Border Protection authorized police vehicle. Now, the first is just a Customs and Border Protection office near the Laredo airport. The second is a satellite office that's here on the north end of town, closer to the last known address for Burgos-Aviles. Now, another area that's kind of interesting, though, is, again, the victim's home, and then these triangles here are physical locations where Burgos-Aviles' location was indicated on a map based on their GPS recordings. One was at 9:49 a.m., a little bit east of the location where the body was found, which is just pretty darn close to this 1:01 p.m. area down near the park. So on this map, what I've done is I brought in some information showing the location of parks in the city of Laredo, but this one is, again, specific, and the places that are specific in this investigation and that become part of testimony in Father McNelby Sports Complex is this area just west of where the homicide occurs, and there's going to be testimony from the detectives where they actually walk a trail along here and see stroller marks and other kinds of things from this child's stroller leading over to this area right here where the parking area is. So I'm going to just pop that off and make it back where we can see it a little easier. Another thing that's kind of interesting to talk about right here is that just at this border crossing was a location where the suspect's vehicle was captured on CCTV. So we know that at one point he was there. And of course, we can see that string of vehicles coming in to be checked at border protection. Another thing that's going to become significant in this case, and I'm going to talk about in detail on Court TV in an interview in just a moment, is the location of the cellular towers in the area. Now in this part of the video, you can see where I've brought in the location of cellular towers in the area. And this creates a really interesting problem. The tower here, for instance, G Tower, is actually at about 650 feet above sea level. The closest tower to the locations that are so important in this investigation is this tower to the north, which is at about 450 feet above sea level. So that becomes really important because the defense is going to raise the claim that it's possible that these data points that come from GPS could be off. And so I've taken the data point from right here at the crime scene and I've added 1 degree, which is what the defense is saying. Is it possible that you could be off 1 degree in your calculations, and how far away would that be if in fact you were? So I thought, let's plot it because this is really significant. This would be the location where that would happen. And if we go back here and look at the map, we can see 1 degree would really, really take that thing way off of the map in regard to what's going on. Now, in today's testimony, the defense brought up a really interesting question saying, what if this location was off by just 1 degree? How far away would that put our client, the suspect in this case, from the crime scene? And so I thought I'd plot that in. Let's just go 1 degree off from this GPS coordinate that has now been provided in court. And notice that puts us way out to the east of the location where these homicides occurred. In fact, we'll just kind of move this back and put this all into context. Now, if in fact this was true, that would mean it would take this individual to get from that point on the map. So the murders occurred here, and that point on the map is clear over here. It would take 1 hour and 49 minutes, almost 2 hours to travel that far. I really hope the prosecution capitalizes on this and brings out the fact that it's absolutely improbable that they were off 1 degree and that they then had CCTV camera footage showing the suspect back at his apartment and in the area where these crimes occurred. So location is going to become incredibly important in this thing. The other thing that's going to be interesting is to look at the most possible routes that the suspect may have taken from his home to the location where the crimes occurred, taking him right by the office here. So that's one possibility. Now we can move that around and we can see that he can go right by the victim's home, or he could go out to the other office, because we know that he was in these different locations. But notice how this either way gets him pretty darn close to the victim's home. Now, if we were to change all of that and look at the path that the victim would most likely take to get from point A to point B, it would look something like this. And again, keep in mind, it's likely, I don't know that I've seen anything to suggest that she drove a vehicle down to the park, most likely walked. It would take 2 minutes to drive there, but if we change this to walking time, it's about a 13-minute walk to get from her home down to the location where those murders occurred. And here's a really significant thing. Is it possible she went a different route? It's probably not probable she did, because you'll notice there are no through streets from her home that would make any better sense for her to be able to get from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time. So that's frankly less likely and gives us a little sense. So hopefully this gives you a sense for the area. And again, let's look closely at the crime scene, because you're going to see testimony coming out. Again, this would be the street that the victim and her baby would have come down. So this is the street where Grizelda Hernandez and little Dominic Hernandez in his stroller would have most likely come down. We know that there are some tracks around this soccer field and that the bodies are recovered here. And then, of course, the police officer references this parking lot. So we got to take into account that it's possible she could have driven all the way over to this parking lot. The question becomes, does that really make sense? And again, if we looked at that from a directional standpoint to get to that parking lot, for her to go from her home to that parking lot is kind of a out-of-the-way route. 7 minutes drive time, so certainly could have done that. And hopefully that will all come out. Maybe some of you have the answer to that, and that you'll provide that in the chat box down below. But I hope this examination of maps and using geography and GIS is helpful. Now, one last thing that I want to touch on before we finish this portion of that is, if in fact they're monitoring in any part or portion of this case cellular traffic, then we have to consider the fact that cellular data comes off of this location that's created. And again, I'm going to talk about this in detail, comes off of the nearest towers. Now, normally a tower has a range of up to about 25 miles, much further than any of the area that we're talking about here. In this particular case, the closest tower to the location of those homicides is 4.56 or 4.5 miles roughly. The next closest tower is almost 9 miles away, 8.9. So think about this. If there's a 25-mile radius, then probably these three towers right here, L Tower, M Tower, and Tank Tower, were the ones that were providing the GPS location for the triangulation that occurred to show the location where these homicides occurred. And that, again, is going to become really significant as the state tries to prove and impeach Avila in his testimony of whether he was in the area or not. Now, folks, I may have said Burgos-Aviles' last name wrong, and I apologize for that. So let's get back to this discussion and my comments on Court TV with Ted Rollins. Well, let me just recap a little bit on cell phone tower data. On average, the maximum usable range of a cell tower is about 25 miles. For those of you overseas, about 40 kilometers. Now, in some cases, cell towers can actually reach out to about 45 miles, but it's really less likely in this scenario given the flat nature of the countryside there in Laredo. In fact, you're going to hear me say on the video when I talk on Court TV that those cell towers, the three closest cell towers to the location of the homicides, averaged in range between 400 and 600 feet above sea level. Now, that's not very high. And if you think about this, usually towers sit on vertical structures that range from 100 feet to 400 feet tall. So that means the actual transmitter was only 600 to 1,000 feet above sea level. Again, that's not very tall. Now, keep in mind that a cell tower's reach is not a fixed distance, and it's influenced by the radio frequency airwaves. Now, this is something they call spectrum, and you'll hear them talk about that usually in the cell phone commercials. Now, this is impacted by bandwidth demand, like we call it network capacity, but maybe where some cell phones get better access to the data than others, or things like the U.S. FirstNet network system gets priority over other network users. Then there are man-made or natural obstructions, the terrain itself, or how much power the cell tower signal is actually being transmitted through. Now, on the day this woman was killed, Grizelda Hernandez told her closest friend that she was going to meet a guy named Anthony who worked for Border Patrol, and that he was separated from his wife. So it makes you wonder if there was a story spun there, maybe a let's get back together story. Now, Hernandez asked her friend how she was looking, and she was primping and pruning, getting ready. Her friend said she looked absolutely great, and they promised to talk as she went on her way. The friend had other conversations before and leading up to this where Hernandez suggested that the father of her child didn't want her to go through with the pregnancy. And that led to them disconnecting and her trying to raise this child on her own. But now she was hoping he could provide some financial support. Well, after the homicide, Burgos-Aviles drove his patrol car erratically over near one of those border crossings that we talked about called World Trade Bridge. And he started driving toward the area where the bodies were discovered. So I think the pressure was really starting to get on him. And it may have gone from this very organized state into this disorganized state where there was a frenzied murder scene because of the number of stab wounds, and that things didn't quite go as easily as he thought. And now trying to figure out how to get this reported and make sure that he didn't leave evidence behind. And the way to do that was to show up by himself, because according to co-workers, he said over the radio that he was following someone and was exploring an area. A short time later, he called in saying that he'd found an injured woman and started requiring and requesting medical first responders. They were summoned and responded, and other police officers and, of course, the Laredo Police Department showed up on scene. At the crime scene, the responders, though, the police officers, found the victim with this incredible amount of blood around her, suggesting a stabbing and blunt force trauma. The cops were really concerned with Burgos-Aviles' activity and how he kept trying to get close to the victim, pacing back and forth, they reported, walking back and forth and saying she needed medical help. One of the officers said that when he saw him walking back and forth, he thought to himself that this guy shouldn't be contaminating the crime scene. He should know better. Well, he probably did know better, and this was a perfect way for him to get his footprints there, his DNA there, and other kinds of things. Moments after they found the mother, Grizelda, they found Dominic, the baby, in the bushes, and the investigation then zoned over to that as well. Now, investigators almost immediately began to focus on Burgos-Aviles. Let's catch my comments on Court TV during the trial as I share some of my thoughts about GPS locations, cell phone, and these land-based radios that are found inside of the Customs and Border Protection units. Let's watch.
All right, sidebar there. Jeffrey Wolf's watching along with us. He's a criminal defense attorney in Denver, Colorado. Also, Mike King is a retired police commander and host of Profiling Evil. Mike King, you're an expert in this field. How reliable is it?
Well, I think it's really reliable based on two factors, Ted. First is that if the mobile device is the location's being determined by triangulation or getting the signal from the cell towers, when I looked at this case and the cell tower array around it, the nearest cell tower is about 4.75 miles away. You need 3 to get a really good triangulation. And the problem is it's running kind of linear because of the border area there. And so you've got the next tower, which is about 8.5 miles away, and you're trying to bring that location. This is all on flat ground, ranging somewhere between 450 feet to 650 feet where those towers are positioned. So it's a pretty flat area. You think about your own cellular activity when you're out trying to make phone calls in some of these rural areas, it's a little challenging. But if Motorola, and I know that company well, is taking the device location, then it could be getting that off of satellites and getting a much more refined address that is going to be much more valuable in the court. So they're going to have to prove how good the drift is in that area, how good the accuracy is in that area, and that's what's really going to put this guy in the location at the right time.
Okay, well, you listen carefully and tell us what you conclude as we continue to watch this. Let's go back in live.
Well, Ted Rowlands then asked me about the differences between cell phone and land mobile radios, but then, most importantly, my opinion about whether the prosecution had proven that Burgos-Aviles was in the location of the victim. Let's watch my response to that question.
Also, we're in Texas, just finished up with the Motorola expert that mapped out the potential location of the defendant during the critical times. Mike King and Jeffrey Wolf are watching along. Mike King, you're an expert in this field with many years of experience. What was your takeaway?
A couple of things really jumped out to me, Ted, and that was number one, the more I listened, the more it was clear that this is device location. It's coming off of a GPS unit in the Border Patrol vehicle, which is going to be incredibly accurate. So I think that's going to be a tough hill for the defense to climb. But something that I hope the prosecution clears up real quickly, because I think the defense did a great job in their cross-examination of creating a little bit of doubt in the accuracy of that data, saying, hey, even what if we were just 1 degree off? Isn't that a long ways away from where we are? And so I plotted that out on a map and I looked at it. It's actually an hour and 30-minute drive time to one coordinate change difference. It's an hour and 31-minute drive time to the other coordinate change difference, which I think is going to be really important as we look at the times where he's captured on CCTV and other things in different changes of clothes. And I think we're going to find that GPS, forensic technology off that mobile device, and that radio system is going to prove to be a real big challenge for the defense.
Yeah, which they sort of promised in openings that they would attack it, and they did attack it. On redirect, when we were in commercial break, the witness actually did do some mop-up saying, yeah, 1 degree would make a huge difference, but this is very accurate and down to, fractions of degrees. Jeff Wolf, does this move the ball for the defense at all? Because I don't know where else they can do much ball movement.
Right. I mean, that's obviously what they're trying to do, right, is to raise as much doubt about this data as possible. The problem is that GPS is a pretty well-accepted data for the general public. So when you have jurors sitting in the box and they're hearing GPS says somebody is at X place, for the most part, the general public is going to agree with that. And
Mike, just to wrap up the GPS segment of this with the Motorola device radio. The defense did bring up a bit of, it's not like a cell phone, right? Because it only records data every so often. So you had over this huge period of time only 8, I think it was, points of data that the jury, the prosecution wants the jury to believe is accurate and puts the defendant in a certain spot. With your expertise, do you think they accomplished that?
I do, Ted, and I think that one thing that they may have been a little short on is clarifying, especially after the defense came out and raised some interesting question about the accuracy of how accurate it was. And so we kind of went full circle. We went from the idea of triangulation off of cell towers down to actually this was the land mobile radio inside of the Customs and Border Protection vehicle that's going to be accessing location data from Motorola's tower infrastructure and other infrastructure. And so what it's really going to boil down to is, can they prove, or is anyone even going to challenge them on what the certainty range is? And Jeff brought it up earlier about this idea that you look on your phone and you see a little blue circle that says you're somewhere in this range. So that's when they triangulate off towers. But when you start getting the actual GPS and device location, that thing really gets down to a small geographic area where they can say, hey, we're within about 10 meters of this location. And boy, I'll tell you, when you look at those numbers that they put up and the fact that they end up right on the map, right next to where those bodies were found, where that police officer pointed on the map, this is where I found that little baby boy, Dominic, that's going to be really tough to overcome.
Jeffrey, the state then follows up the tedious cell phone data person with a cop that breaks down and gets emotional talking about a dead baby. Talk about bringing it back to reality. Your thoughts on the way that was structured and the level of impact that this officer in uniform could have on this jury when he got emotional?
Yeah, I think it was an extremely effective scheduling of witnesses, because what we often see in these trials is we see technical expert after technical expert after technical expert, and that can lull the jury to sleep and have them miss some or all of what these technical experts are saying. But what you want to do if you're effectively presenting a case is you want to snap the jury's attention back to you. And this is how you do it. You have a very dry witness that is on the stand for a while, and the jury is starting to get a little bogged down in data. And then next what you have is the officer who found the little boy's body and his clothing, and you have those exhibits. And that brings the emotional core back into the case and reminds the jury why they're there, reminds them what they're there to figure out, so that when you put your next technical expert up, they are listening, they are paying attention, and they are grounded in what this case is about. Because what this case is about for the prosecution in this case is a dead 18-month-old and getting some justice for him and his mother. And if they can keep the jury focused on why they are there, they're going to get them to listen to the witnesses that are harder to understand and harder to stay awake for.
So there you go. What are your thoughts, folks? I mean, do you think the prosecution has adequately proven that Ronald Burgos-Aviles, by the way, Ronald Anthony Burgos-Aviles, was in the area of the homicides before they were reported, and of course, sometime later? I hope you're going to put your thoughts down below, and I hope you'll take time to chat with each other on this one. And make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button and ringing the bell, and please share Profiling Evil with all your friends. You can find Profiling Evil at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course here on YouTube, and I hope that you'll subscribe there. Now please consider joining our channel memberships. My favorite, I've said it before, is the Academy level. It's a place where you can get a whole lot more information for just a little bit more. You can also donate directly to Profiling Evil through PayPal, and if you're interested, some people have started sending gift cards through Amazon. You can do the gift card and then send it to profilingevil@gmail.com. I'll tell you what, we really appreciate it. It helps us in purchasing things that we need here at Profiling Evil, and your support is deeply appreciated. So thanks so much for that support. Well, keep watching this case, and let's see if this guy's found guilty of these 2 murders. And until then, thanks for your support. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.